Sometimes, love doesn't leave because it's weak, it leaves because it's strong enough to let you grow. When she walked away, I thought she'd betrayed me. I thought the world had chosen sides, and I was left holding the pieces of a heart I didn't deserve. But what I didn't know was that her silence wasn't punishment, it was purpose. Her absence would become the mirror I needed to face everything I'd done wrong. And when truth finally came crashing in, it didn't whisper. It screamed. This is the story of how one woman's quiet departure taught me the meaning of real love, through betrayal, injustice, and redemption. There was a time when I thought love was supposed to be easy, that if you cared enough, everything else would fall into place. I grew up in a small southern town where promises were made more often than they were kept, and where love stories were whispered about like folklore, rarely seen, often broken. Her name was Eliana. She carried light in her eyes, a kind of strength that didn't need to be loud. When she walked into a room, people paid attention, not because she demanded it, but because she carried something deeper than beauty. She carried truth. We met in college, during a time when the world still felt open and wide. She studied literature. I studied ambition. She read stories about courage and pain. I tried to avoid both. Our love started like a sunrise, gentle, hopeful, filled with promise. We spent long hours walking through campus, dreaming of the future. But what I didn't realize was that love requires more than dreams, it requires integrity. As I pursued my career, I started to change. Success came, slowly at first, then all at once. And with every milestone, I started measuring my worth by the applause I received. I wanted to be seen, respected, celebrated. Somewhere along the way, I forgot to see her. Eliana worked in social advocacy, fighting quietly for justice in a town that didn't always want to change. Her work wasn't glamorous, but it was meaningful. She saw things others ignored: unfair wages, racial bias, the subtle cruelties hidden behind polite smiles. She tried to tell me once about a young man named Jordan, a colleague of hers who'd been denied a promotion despite his qualifications. She said, "They told him he wasn't the right fit. But we both know what that means here." I nodded, half listening, thinking about a presentation I had the next day. I told her she worried too much, that the world was fairer than she thought. But fairness is often a privilege of those who don't have to fight for it. Slowly, the distance grew. She wanted me to understand, not just her, but the people she fought for. I wanted her to be proud of me. But pride built on blindness is just ego in disguise. There were nights she came home tired, eyes heavy with stories she couldn't tell. And I, wrapped in my own ambition, mistook her silence for disinterest. We drifted. Not with anger, but with indifference, which is worse. Because love doesn't die in storms, it dies in quiet rooms, with people sitting side by side, both feeling alone. Then came the night everything changed, when betrayal wore a face I never expected. It was a fundraiser, a charity gala meant to raise awareness for the very causes Eliana dedicated her life to. She'd invited me, hoping I'd finally see her world, the one beyond corporate numbers and polished smiles. The room sparkled with polished floors and fragile egos. People clinked glasses, whispered names, and smiled for cameras. But behind those smiles, something colder brewed. Eliana introduced me to her colleagues. Some greeted me warmly, others with eyes that seemed to measure the color of my skin before the worth of my words. One man, her director, shook my hand, then turned to Eliana and said, "He's a sharp one. Maybe one day we'll have more like him, the kind who can blend in." Blend in? The words sat heavy. I laughed it off, not wanting to make a scene. But Eliana's face told another story, a quiet pain she'd worn too many times. Later that night, I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to. Her director and another board member spoke in hushed tones about representation quotas and optics. To them, people like Eliana weren't voices. They were boxes to check, symbols to display when convenient. And yet I stayed silent. Because speaking up might have made me uncomfortable. Because I told myself it wasn't my fight. But betrayal isn't always a knife in the back. Sometimes, it's the silence we choose when someone we love is bleeding. A week later, a decision was made at my firm, one that mirrored the same injustice Eliana had tried to show me. A brilliant black colleague, Marcus, was passed over for a promotion I knew he deserved. The reason given? Not the right culture fit. This time, the truth hit closer. And again I stayed silent. Eliana found out, not because I told her, but because Marcus had once volunteered with her nonprofit. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just looked at me and asked, "When will you stand for something that doesn't serve you?" I had no answer. That night she packed her things. There was no fight, no slammed doors, just a quiet resolve. She said, "Love without courage isn't love. It's convenience." Then she walked away. At first, I told myself I didn't need her. That I could move on, bury the ache under work and success. But silence has a way of echoing. Her absence filled every corner of my life. Weeks turned into months. The apartment felt bigger, emptier. Her books still lined the shelves, titles about resistance, healing, hope. I started reading them, searching for pieces of her. Then came the story that shattered everything. Jordan, the colleague she'd once defended, was wrongfully terminated. His dismissal sparked protests across town. News outlets covered it briefly, then moved on. But Eliana didn't. She led a campaign for his reinstatement, organizing rallies, gathering signatures, standing in the same sun I'd once avoided. I watched from afar, ashamed, but transfixed. She was fighting battles I'd once dismissed, carrying truths I'd been too afraid to hold. One evening, I attended a community meeting she organized. I sat in the back, unnoticed, listening as she spoke. Her voice was steady, her words sharp. She spoke about systems built to silence, about the cost of complacency. She said, "Some betrayals are loud, but the quiet ones, the ones born of comfort and fear, they cut the deepest." I realized then, the betrayal wasn't hers. It was mine. Against her. Against truth. Against myself. The love she gave me wasn't weak. It was brave enough to walk away from someone unwilling to see. In that room, surrounded by people I'd once ignored, I finally understood. Change doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in quiet acts of accountability. I started small. I confronted my firm about their hiring practices, their bias hidden behind polished mission statements. I stood beside Marcus, not above him. Together, we pushed for change, not because it was easy, but because it was right. It wasn't about guilt. It was about growth. About learning that love and justice aren't separate paths. They're the same road, paved with courage. I never asked Eliana to come back. Some lessons aren't meant to restore what was lost, but to prepare us for who we're meant to become. Years later, I saw her again, at a conference on equity and leadership. She was radiant, centered, alive. Our eyes met across the room. She smiled softly, the way you do when you've forgiven someone, not because they earned it, but because you've moved on. In that moment, I realized something. She hadn't left to punish me. She'd left to free me. Sometimes, love walks away so you can learn to stand for something greater than yourself. And when you finally do, you understand, real love doesn't always stay. Sometimes it leads you toward who you were always meant to be. So I ask you, if love walked away from your life today, would you be brave enough to ask why? Or would you stay silent, mistaking comfort for love and fear for peace? Because silence may feel safe, but it's the loudest form of betrayal there is.